Welcome back, everyone, to the Innovation Brief by IdeaScale, the show that helps busy leaders like you stay ahead of the innovation curve.
Absolutely.
And today we're doing a deep dive into a visual tool that's super powerful for problem solving and driving innovation. Now, this might be something you haven't really thought about in a while.
Right.
It's the Fishbone Diagram.
Yeah.
We're going to go beyond its traditional use in quality control and really explore how it can be used for cultural change and future planning.
It's true. The fishbone diagram is often seen as just like this basic, simple tool, but the way you can apply it is so much more sophisticated and powerful than most people realize.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by those less conventional applications. I mean, there's so much emphasis placed on using it for root cause analysis in manufacturing.
Mhm.
But I've heard that it can be used for everything from understanding complex systems to even shaping organizational culture.
You're exactly right. It's not just about finding defects on a factory floor anymore. Take, for example, the challenge of improving customer experience. A fishbone diagram can map out all the potential steps and touch points involved in that customer journey. It can really help you anticipate roadblocks and identify areas for improvement, and ultimately design an experience that's way more seamless and satisfying for your customers.
So it's almost a proactive tool, not just a reactive one.
Exactly. It lets you actually visualize that ideal outcome you want, and then you can work backward to identify all the factors that are going to either contribute to it or hinder its achievement.
That's such an interesting way to think about it. And this idea of proactive analysis kind of ties into another application I'm curious about. Using fishbone diagrams for reflection and learning from past experiences.
Yeah, that's a great point. Think about it this way. Every time you use a fishbone diagram to address a challenge, you're essentially creating this historical record of your thinking. You can then go back and analyze those diagrams and really see, okay, what worked, what didn't work, and try to identify patterns in your approach to problem solving.
That makes a lot of sense. It's almost like turning those past challenges into these data points
Yeah.
for future decision making.
Precisely. And speaking of data, another really interesting way fishbone diagrams are being used today is to formulate theories. Let's say your team is struggling with a new product launch and you're not sure why it's not gaining traction. Well, you can use a fishbone diagram to systematically explore all the potential factors at play, from your marketing messaging to the product features themselves, even competitor analysis. And then you can try to prioritize which theories to test first.
So it's about bringing structure to what can often be a very messy and intuitive process.
Absolutely. It helps you move from just gut feeling to data-driven decision-making, even when you're dealing with these complex and ambiguous problems.
Now, one area I'm super intrigued by is this concept of using fishbone diagrams to design for culture. I have to admit that one sounds a little less intuitive to me. Can you maybe elaborate on that a bit?
Of course. So let's say, for example, you're leading a digital transformation initiative within your organization. You know that this change is necessary, but you're also aware that it might be met with some resistance from employees.
Because change can be scary, right? Especially in a work environment.
Exactly. And that's where the fishbone diagram comes in. You can actually use it to map out all the potential sources of resistance you might encounter, like fear of job displacement, lack of understanding of new technologies, attachment to those existing processes, and so on. By identifying those sources up front, you can then proactively address them, whether it's through communication training or even adjusting your implementation plan a little bit.
It's like you're anticipating the human element of change and building in solutions from the very start. That's incredibly valuable.
It is. And I think it highlights the true power of the fishbone diagram, its versatility. It's not just a tool for identifying causes and effects. It's a tool for understanding, for planning, and ultimately for shaping the outcomes you want.
Well, it sounds like a great way to bring teams together and foster a more collaborative problem-solving approach as well.
Absolutely. It's about getting everyone on the same page, visualizing the problem, and working together to find those most effective solutions.
Okay, I'm definitely starting to see the potential here. But before we get too carried away, I think it's important to ground this conversation in a bit of practicality. For those of us who might be new to using fishbone diagrams in this way, can you walk us through that basic process?
Of course. The beauty of the fishbone diagram is that it's actually a relatively simple tool to use, even when you're applying it to complex situations.
Well, that's good news. I'm all about keeping things simple, especially when it comes to innovation.
So it starts with clearly defining the problem or challenge you're trying to address. That becomes the head of your fish, so to speak.
Right, I can see that. And I imagine the next step is to draw that backbone line extending out from the problem.
Precisely. Then you identify the main categories that might contribute to the problem, which become the bones branching off the backbone. These categories can vary depending on the situation, but common ones include people, processes, technology, environment, and data.
Okay, so you've got your problem, you've got your backbone, and you've got your main categories. What comes next?
That's when the brainstorming begins. You gather your team and start generating as many potential causes as possible under each category.
This is where like those whiteboards and sticky notes come in handy, right?
Exactly. It's a very visual process, which really helps to stimulate that creative thinking and collaboration.
And I imagine this is also where things can get really insightful as you start to see connections and patterns emerge that you might not have noticed before.
Absolutely. Once you have a good list of potential causes, the next step is to really analyze them. This involves, discussing them as a team, debating their relevance, and trying to figure out, okay, which ones are most likely contributing to the problem.
So it's not just about brainstorming a bunch of ideas. It's
No.
about critically evaluating those ideas
Yeah.
and prioritizing them based on their potential impact.
Right. You might use data, you might use experience, or even just a simple voting system to rank the causes and figure out, okay, which ones really warrant further investigation.
And this leads to the next step, which is all about getting to that root cause.
Right? Yes.
Right.
Identifying the root cause is absolutely crucial because that's the underlying issue that needs to be addressed. In order to truly solve the problem, it's about peeling back the layers and just keep asking why, until you get to the heart of the matter.
I like that, get to the heart of it.
Okay.
Okay, so once you've identified the root cause, what happens next?
Well, that's when you start brainstorming solutions. This is where you get creative and think about all the different ways you can address that root cause and mitigate its effects.
And then, of course, you need an action plan to turn those ideas into reality.
Exactly. A good action plan is going to outline the specific steps that need to be taken. Assign responsibilities, set deadlines, and establish metrics for tracking your progress.
So it's all about moving from analysis to action.
It is. And the final step is implementation and monitoring. This involves putting your action plan into motion, tracking your progress, and making those little adjustments along the way as needed.
It sounds like a really comprehensive process. But I imagine the beauty of it is that it can really be adapted to fit any situation, whether you're dealing with like a complex strategic challenge or just a simple operational issue.
You're absolutely right. The Fishbone Diagram is a versatile tool that can be used in so many different contexts. And it's especially valuable for innovation leaders who are constantly facing new challenges and, striving to create positive change within their organizations.
This has been so insightful. I'm already starting to think about how I can apply these principles in my own work.
And that's what it's all about. The Fishbone Diagram is a tool that empowers you to think more critically, solve problems more effectively, and ultimately drive meaningful innovation.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into the Fishbone Diagram. For our listeners who are looking to turn their work teams into innovators, I encourage you to check out IdeaScale. It's an amazing platform that provides the tools and framework to capture ideas, collaborate on solutions, and bring those ideas to life.
Yeah, IdeaScale really is a game changer. And this conversation has reminded me of one of the key benefits of using a platform like IdeaScale. It allows you to capture and analyze data throughout that entire innovation process.
That's a great point. Data is so crucial for making informed decisions, especially when it comes to innovation.
Exactly. With IdeaScale, you can track the progress of ideas, measure their impact, and really identify patterns that can inform your future innovation efforts.
And right now, you can book a demo for a free trial at IdeaScale.com. Don't miss out on this opportunity to unlock the innovative potential within your organization.
I highly recommend it.
And that brings us to the end of another episode of the Innovation Brief. Remember, new episodes drop every Tuesday and Friday, so be sure to subscribe and leave us a comment below with your thoughts or questions. We love hearing from you.
And if you are looking for ways to turn your work team into innovators, head on over to IdeaScale.com and book a demo for a free trial.
That's right, folks. It's a game changer.
Until next time, keep innovating.
And before we go, one last thought. Imagine using a Fishbone diagram to anticipate and address potential resistance to your next big initiative. How much smoother could that implementation be?
Something to think about.
Until next time.